Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Tattoos with Intention podcast. I'm your host, Mark Nara. Thank you all for being here. Just a quick note before we start this conversation. If you enjoy listening or you find anything that we talk about in these podcasts useful, could you please click the subscribe button or share the episode on your social network? It'll help spread the conversation more than anything else you can do. This podcast has been scheduled for one episode a month this entire year, and we're on track. It's part of my effort to share zero-cost information that's aimed to give you insights and tools that'll be beneficial in regards to relating to your own tattoo journey and having a more meaningful experience. So as I've mentioned, give us a follow, spread the word, and enjoy the episode. This episode is an interview with Moko artist Turumakina Duley. Just for some background, I first met Tu back in 2015. At that time, I decided to jump on a plane and fly over to New Zealand to attend an Indigenous tattoo gathering, something different to the conventional tattoo conventions in Australia. And as chance would have it, we were both staying at the same home of a mutual friend and another tattoo artist. So that's where we met. And from that first interaction, Tu, along with his wife, Ithi, have been extremely kind and giving to myself. They have shared their home with me and their studio at times, and they're always modeling a very integral way of living and practicing the craft of tattooing and how it connects to a greater context than just the art for them. So I always end up very humbled and learning a lot when I get the opportunity to see them or have conversations. And luckily for you all this time, we plan to record this one, which I feel covers some extremely important aspects of tattooing that are regularly overlooked or misunderstood. In this conversation, Tu recounts some of his life stories. He describes the times which ignited his connection to his Maori culture and to Moko, or traditional tattooing. He shares how he started his tattooing career and his learning journey, which included mentorship from a tohunga, a master carver, and one of the first Moko revivalists. Discussing the significance of rites of passage, Tu explains how Moko can be a transformative experience and the importance of re-establishing traditional practices. He also touches on global cultural exchanges through tattooing, his doctoral thesis on rites of passage, and efforts to revive these practices within his own community. He emphasizes the collective aspect of these rituals and the detrimental effects of losing them. So the conversation delves into the psychological and communal impacts of rites of passage, as well as his personal experience and future plans. And so here it is.
Yeah, my name's Turumakina Duley. I originally come from Aotearoa, New Zealand, born and raised in the Bay of Plenty. Actually, as a boy, I was living in Australia for about 5 years of my life, right up until I was about 12. And then I moved home for high school by myself. Left the mum and dad and the sisters over here and moved home for high school and back into the hometown, stayed with my grandparents. From after high school, I got involved in the Polynesian dance troupe, which kind of took me all over the world, and started getting really interested in my roots because of the dance troupe. And it was strange because it was a missionary Christian dance group called Island Breeze that was using culture to spread a message of the gospel, I suppose. It gave me exposure to stage and to kapahaka and other Polynesian performances, which led into actual involvement in like matatini level competition, kapahaka back in Aotearoa. And so I got interested in Moko through having to research and look at how we use Moko on the stage for things like kapahaka and cultural performance. So I spent a good 10 years drawing on myself and drawing on our teammates' faces and bodies and all that kind of stuff before I even considered becoming a tattooist. It was always something I was interested in Moko since I first glimpsed a photo of my grandmother, a great-grandmother, when I was probably in my teens or maybe a little bit younger. She had a traditional kowai on her chin. And, growing up around the marae back in Aotearoa, you see these images of our ancestors who were fully moko up. Yeah, moko was one of these mysterious things from our cultural past that had been lost. I started because one of my bros in the cultural performance teams turned up to my house one day with a homemade tattoo machine and asked me to tattoo. I was like, okay, let's do this. We jumped in there and gave it a good shot. So it's just a little band around his calf sort of thing. And yeah, I got hooked from there. So I spent 6 years. My first 6 years of tattooing was making homemade machines and learning some really bad habits, hygiene wise and all that kind of stuff, just backyard switch up, And I started to research more about Moko, and there wasn't a lot about Moko out there in the literature in those days. It was bugger all. And the one book that I did find was by this guy, David Simmons. And it was the only information I had really. So I started putting some of it up on a website that I developed about Moko. And then one day this stranger messaged me out of the blue because of my Facebook, because of my website page, and started talking about David Simmons and the information in his book. And his name is Mark Nara, and he was a master carver from Tolaga Bay, which is on the east coast of New Zealand, who had shifted his skill set from carving to Moko. And he reached out and said, "Oh, look, this is who I am, blah, blah, blah." And just want to let you know that there's a lot of information in that book of David Simmons that is all kaka. So if you want to learn some real stuff, come and see me. So I did. And I met up with him at Rotorua. And since that time, I've been mentored by Mark Nara, who is really one of the forerunners, first generation forerunners of Moko revivalists in Aotearoa. There's a handful of them. And he was one of them, instrumental in organizing Moko wānanga around the country at the national level and even governmental level with Te Uhia Mataora, which is an ambassadorial Moko crew, of which I used to be a part of before I moved here to Australia. And we would get sent all over the world for cross-cultural ambassadorial work on behalf of the New Zealand government, which was cool. I got exposed to different cultures. Native Americans especially was one that we really gelled with on the Pacific Arts Festival in Samoa, National Gallery in Canberra. So we were sent around the world as artists to perpetuate and revive the art form of Moko. And so I started it was around 93. So I've been doing it 31 years now. I've been involved with Moko. And I was talking about the first generation of Moko practitioners, and there's people like Mark and Derek Lardeli, Rangi Kipa is another one, Ricky Manuel, Gordon Hatfield, Toy Hatfield. There's a handful of them that really drove the cope up of reviving Moko as an art form. So I've been involved with that for over 30 years now. And over the last 2.5 years, I've been undertaking my doctoral thesis in restoring rites of passage, Moko as a rite of passage for my Natio. I've just submitted the doctoral thesis for examination, so I'm just waiting on that to happen, which will springboard me into a more deeper level of tattooing as a ritual art form, where I'll try for my people back in Aotearoa. That's where I'm at the moment.
Yeah, no, beautiful, man. Thanks for that. Such a good timeline to see there. I didn't realize that you were drawing stuff at 12 years old on the dance crew. That's crazy, yeah.
Yeah, it would have been late teens. I would have started
Late
there.
teens. Okay.
Like 18, 19, I started,
Yeah, it makes more sense with someone bringing you the homemade machine now, because I knew that you had some mates bring you the machines and ask you to do it, but now I get why, because you were already drawing it on them and they wanted it there. So
Heaps. Yeah, we were drawing heaps, yeah.
that makes sense. I remember getting in trouble for drawing on kids at school as well. Hey, they're like, stop doing that.
Well, it was only drawing, back in our days, there was actual needle and cotton.
Yeah. Funny,
crosses and things all over the hands and stuff.
Yeah. There's a few different directions I'd like to explore from what you just mentioned, especially like where you're at now and your thesis on the rites of passage, because there's a lot of people use that language within tattooing, and I think there's probably still a bit of confusion around what exactly that is, and I guess the back end of it, what makes something a rites of passage, and then where's that language getting used in a way that probably isn't appropriate. But before we go there, just to set up a little bit more in terms of your own story, I've got a couple of questions, and one of them is what your first tattoo was that you got.
From the same guy that brought me the homemade tattoo machine.
Oh, yeah,
I tattooed him and he tattooed me. It was like minimal. It was an armband around my arm, around my right arm. So nothing major. An introduction to the art form and the pain, so to speak.
Yeah. Would you consider your first tattoo as being an initiation coming from the place you're at now?
Totally. It was a small initiation
Hmm.
into the depths of what tattooing can be, I suppose. What it should be, I suppose, is a better way to put it.
Yep.
When we look at it from a traditional point of view, Moko was, and Polynesian tattooing in general was our method of initiating people through rites of passage. It was a major part of rites of passage. And generations now, since the advent of colonization in Aotearoa, one of the things that was targeted and gotten rid of was rituals amongst the indigenous peoples. And so rites of passage was one of those things that took a dive through things like assimilation and religion and all that kind of stuff,
Yep.
education system. So the intention of the Crown was to ensure that traditional knowledge bases were done away with, basically, and insert their own narratives of creation and religion and the purposes of education and all that kind of stuff. Traditional knowledge was considered pagan, this sort
Mm,
of thing.
mm, mm.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
our rituals really went underground. They went into hiding by the keepers of the knowledge who, if they were found practicing, would have been thrown in jail for 20 years hard labor sort of a thing. So our knowledge base went underground. It wasn't made accessible to the common people, so to speak. And
Yeah.
so rites of passage, which was generally a collectively driven experience, usually by elders who had all gone through the process themselves and were handing down knowledge and ways of maturing the human psyche through controlled means, through ritual. So all those things took a dive and went out the door.
Mm-mm.
And on the subconscious level, though, especially males, because males don't have to undergo the grueling process of giving birth or menstruation or anything like that. Females do. So females, they get initiated into maturity naturally
Yeah.
through
Yeah.
just through their bodily functions, whereas males have to go through ritual, endurance, and all these kinds of things to match the maturity, so to speak. And because the rituals were taken away during the colonization period, a lot of our men were left psychologically immature. There's quite a bit of research out there from the Western side of academia that speaks to all of that. And usually young males will, a teenager will start fantasizing about being hero,
Uh-huh.
superheroes and all that kind of thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a good sign that they're ready for rites of passage. And subconsciously they'll go looking for it. And a lot
Hmm.
of our young men have done so not through positive means. A lot of them end up going to gangs to find those things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gang initiation is a big deal in the gangs. And so that's one way to prove yourself as a man, I suppose.
Mm-mm.
So, we're getting into the rites of passage dialogue where indigenous cultures all over the planet had practiced rites of passage rituals for the purpose of ensuring that, one, you know who you are, why you're here on the planet. You have a sense of belonging. You belong to this people group. This is our purpose. This is how the world was created, and you're a part of that world. Now, all these are origin narratives that were usually disseminated through those ritual spaces, gave you a sense of, oh, okay, there's a purpose for my life. And I'm being
Yes.
guided through my life because I've got all these elders over here who are helping me step me through the process. So, you can imagine the impacts of losing those types of collective rituals on the human mind, right? A lot of us are running around. I'm 50, and looking back over my life, I can see that there were certain experiences in my life that constituted a rites of passage, even though I hadn't intentionally undergone those experiences as a rite of passage.
Yep.
Nevertheless, looking back, they were definitely a rite of passage. Things like leaving my parents in Australia and moving home to New Zealand
Hmm.
on my own with my grandparents, that was a definite rite of passage. I had to grow up quick. And things like the same missionary group that I was doing the Polynesian dance troupe, a group of us were invited into the Amazon by the shaman of a tribe in there who was really worried about the condition of his people because they were dwindling in numbers, and there was a historical event that caused them to start committing suicide to go and be with the ancestors. It was a bit of a strange situation. But anyway, he's seen some photos of our group performing in Florida and by the missionaries that were in there with him. And these missionaries took photos back to the tribe and showed them the photos. And he said to them, I've been having dreams about these people coming in to help us break this curse on our people, because he was worried there's only about 50 of them left, right? And so he said, I want you to bring them in here and ask them to help us. So they did. They invited us in, and 8 of us went into the Amazon. And so I'm talking, we landed in Portobello, northern Brazil, had to pull this little 8-seater plane out of the garage and almost started to get it going. And then fly into the jungle, and all you can see from horizon to horizon is broccoli. It's just jungle.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah. And then we land in this little mission house on the side of a river, which is just a field. No runway or nothing. And I think we spend the night there. The next day we get in a longboat and go up the river for about 5 hours and get to another little hut on the side of the big river. And then we walk for 2 days into the jungle, sleep in the open jungle on the first night. While I say sleep, you don't sleep, put it that way. You're shitting yourself. A Western person sleeping out in the jungle for the first night, you're shitting yourself. You don't sleep at all. Things like that are definitely a rite of passage where you got to confront fears. And another one would be, we used to spend a lot of time in Hawaii, and we would go night diving as a crew. So diving in the ocean at night for seafood. Again, you've got to confront some fears. So things like that really constitute or give you a space to address your fears as a human being. It puts you in your place because, for instance, you're in a jungle or you're in the middle of the ocean at night with a torch in your hand. You're at the mercy of nature. So you know your place in the world as a human being. And so things like that have been really sorely missed by a majority of the population, of males especially. We're a couple of generations of uninitiated men, which means most of us are men physically, bodily, but maturity-wise, we're still running around little boys.
Yeah.
And that's the real purpose of a rite of passage, is to mark those milestones of growth in your life. And that was, like I said, that was usually a collective deal, usually run by elders, not by the lone tattooist guy at a convention proclaiming to be a shaman or anything like that. You know what I'm saying? And this is where the whole rites of passage thing starts to become a trendy thing. And I'm sure that the notion of it is well intended, but really those community-driven, collectively driven ritualistic ceremony is really where rites of passage gets experienced authentically.
Yep. Yeah, well, I mean, going off that too, a couple of things my mind was drawing on and going, okay, what are the differences between this contemporary context where people are seeking that, but maybe not actually receiving it, compared to, say, in the cultural context where it's established, and there is that fear factor you're talking about, where it's like, you're not going to sleep if you're in the jungle for the first night and you're a boy and it's a different place. And you also have no choice being there. Whereas I think the modern setting is people are seeking, and then it's their choice what they put themselves through. And who these days in the comfy world we're in is going to choose to put themselves through something that's truly challenging or that they're shit scared of? Not many people are.
Exactly. So many cultures, when it came time for coming of age, for example, especially for males, subcultures, some tribes would just come and take the boys. Take them away from the mother, especially. Cut the apron string, so to speak. And the boys often had no idea what was going on or what the purpose of this was.
Yeah.
And so sometimes they'd be gone for weeks, sometimes they'd be gone for months. It's time to now step away from being, protected by the mother into becoming a protector with the father. Those are those major transitions in life that rites of passage addresses. And so oftentimes There's one, I can't remember the name of the tribe in America. It's a Native American tribe where the boy was taken into the forest and he had to spend the night alone in the forest blindfolded. Right. And so he's sitting in the forest at night blindfolded. All he can do was sit on his rock and listen and endure the night. Little did he know that his father was sitting just over there watching over him. So just to make sure he's safe. But he doesn't know that. So he's still got to go in that whole process of confronting his fears and pushing himself through all of that mental shadow.
Yeah. That reminds me of my teacher who passed. He told me his first vision quest, and he was Native American. He said his uncle just took him out to the bush and they set up a little camp. And then he said to him, just wait here, I'll be back, type of thing. And then just didn't come back for the night. So there he was out, not knowing.
Next day.
Yeah, it was the next morning he came back, but it was probably the same story.
Yeah.
Hey, his uncle was probably within reach, just seeing how he'd cope, I guess. But that's an interesting part. It's not an invitation. What you're explaining, it's less of an invitation than it is now. It was more of a prescription, like that's part of being part of these people, or this just happens at this age. Whereas now, like you said, it's the subconscious is wanting to experience it, but what avenues do people have? So they start reaching for the things they can, and sure, tattoos is one of them, and I guess it's a healthy option as well. But I don't know, what do you think can be introduced into the contemporary culture to help it actually have the psychological element that's missing, to move it into a space where it's got more substance?
Yeah, it's a tough one because the tattoo industry is very much the way I see it now anyway, it's very much a trend-driven industry.
Mhm.
The thing that's lacking from a rites of passage perspective, from a indigenous rites of passage perspective, is the community-driven element of rites of passage. It's still really fresh amongst the Maori people as well. We have Moko now, which is tribal gatherings where people come expressly for facial markings.
Mhm.
And even then, we're still in our infancy stages of reviving this stuff, as opposed to the Samoans who have been practicing their tattooing unbroken for over 1,000 years. We're only 30 years, 40 years into the revival of our art form. And a lot of knowledge has been lost. A lot of understandings has been lost. And so we're at the stage where now we have to take some educated guesses and rebuild our rite of passage process as a collective being the significant term there. It's not something that one person should be driving. It's something that tribal collective should be driving. And that's just the recommendation that I'm putting forward.
Yeah. So it's not like an individual prescription where you go like, I'm self-initiating myself into this version of myself for myself.
People are doing that, and I'm sure it has some effectiveness. Yeah. But the other thing is too that life can often, like I was saying before, when I'm looking back on my life, there's been things that I can definitely say, oh man, that was a rite of passage. And life can initiate you through things like crisis. Crisis makes you confront a lot of those things as well. Losing a parent or both parents or natural disasters, those type of events can really help you to confront a lot of the maturity that will come from going through that crisis. You know what I'm saying? So life can often throw curveballs at us, so to speak. For me, colonization was one of those curveballs as a collective colonization.
Yeah, that deliberate disruption, I suppose, to, like you were saying, to the procedures that were already in place. Yeah, it's initiation where it's like you guys are having to, like, I think the language you used last time we chatted was you've had to reverse engineer a lot of these things.
And we had to adapt into a whole new way of living, a whole new way of being, whether we liked it or not. And that's the same for every culture on the planet now. We've all had to adapt into this new world that we're living in, and it's getting crazier and crazier every day. So adaptation is really one of those things that usually rites of passage would mark those major milestones where there's big changes in your life. And so it was an ongoing process. It wasn't just the one process like coming of age. Coming of age was the beginning of your rites of passage journey, apart from birth, of course. And so coming of age, you would get your first tattoo marks. The next mark may have been between the ages of 18 to 21 or something like that, where you're stepping into that responsible adult role of protecting the people and protecting the land in the traditional sense. So you're becoming one of the warriors that protected the people. And that would be a major rite of passage, because you'd usually undergo the peha, or what the Samoans call the peha, the full leg, body, torso tattoo. And that's a grueling ordeal up to a week, a week ordeal sort of a thing. And so that really pushes you to the limits of your ability to handle such things as a human, as a man, as an adult, young adult, stepping into that role of being the protector for the people. But then you got to get to the point where you're going to want to tap out. You're going to get to the point where you're like, what the fuck am I doing this for? You know what I'm saying? This 6-7 day ordeal, and you go, fuck it, can I finish this? Am I going to be able to do this? You got your people around you. You got your family around you, all encouraging you, making sure that you're there, giving their support, aroha, songs, hakans, all that kind of thing. And you get to the final stage of it, the final day and the last parts of it, and you're like, I handled that shit. That makes a big impact on your psyche. So now you know that, man, I can take some pain. So I've got some good mental fortitude stored up inside of myself now to handle some of the shit that's going to come my way in life.
Yeah, I can see that.
That's really the guts of what rites of passage is about. And it's a controlled space, a controlled environment, usually handled by the elders.
Yeah, I got a couple of different like definitions of it here. Again, because it's like the language just gets turned around so much. You're giving these examples of firsthand experiences but for me getting my head around it, because it's like you can use it and explain that, but then someone else uses the language and they're doing something totally different. So for initiation, my definition that I've been running is that it's like introduction to something you didn't know before, which is what you're talking about there, right? The person going through that marking doesn't know that they can get through 7 days of tattooing. In fact, they probably doubt it as they're going through it. But then they have that experience afterwards of like, okay, I can. I see that.
Yeah. So right there, you've been initiated into manhood, or initiated into the men's house, or initiated into certain groups.
Yeah, and so a piece of that, which is important, like you said, is the group and the collective, right? Because you've been initiated into something, and the reason you're in that and you fit is because all the other men there have been through the same thing. So there's a joint knowledge base then, opposed to just the individual.
Yeah, that's right. They are the ones initiating you into the group.
Yep.
Themselves,
Yeah. So let me try this one with you. You also use the word ceremony, right? Which is another one that gets thrown around a lot, I think, and there's probably diluted versions or weaker versions of this going around compared to something in its proper context, right? Yeah, so I've got like a ceremony is a set of rites, which we've been talking about. Rites are a set of actions, procedures that are designed and prescribed by a unified group for a specific reason. And then the rituals, the performance of those procedures. And so the other distinction that I'm trying to pull out as well, people will use ritual to describe really everyday things. And obviously what you're talking about here, and when we talk about a ceremony, is something that's very significant, right? Sacred. So brush the ritual of brushing your teeth every day, or the ritual of making your coffee. It's, again, you can see how the words used differently.
Yeah. See, in traditional Maori life, everything during the day was ritualized. And so when we talk about ritual, brushing your teeth or making your coffee, in Japan, where the tea ceremony is ritualized, right? Japan is a very ritualized culture as well. And very similar to Maori culture in that aspect. The beautiful thing about ritual, and you'll see it in places like Bali and Thailand and all these other Asian countries, where they devotees to their environment. So they'll be, every morning you'll walk down the street in Bali and you'll see them making offerings to their environment. When we as indigenous cultures especially, and think about ritual, it's our way of interacting with our environment, interacting with nature around us, saying, okay, I'm a part of this environment, and I acknowledge that The forest offers and provides food. The land provides food. The ocean provides food. I'm not about to go walking around in this world like a capitalist, a really bad capitalist, I should say, and just treat you like you're a resource for me to profit off of. You know what I'm saying? So a ritual is really about intending the intention of connecting to your environment. So if you're doing that, brushing your teeth, that's awesome. So not to diminish all of those little rituals during the day, because that's one way of connecting, not just with the natural environment around you, but your internal environment, your intentions of why you're doing things and just doing things consciously rather than running around on autopilot.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm with you, man. Another thing that I thought would be a good thing to try and unpack a bit is with your thesis that you put forward currently. You're again trying to reinstate something that has been disrupted, and
Yeah.
like you said, it's been 30 or 40 years in the process of everybody within the
Mhm.
Maori culture working together and re-engaging and embracing and reworking it. And so
Yeah.
for yourself now, you're at this point where you're 50, been tattooing for 30 plus years, been involved, and you're just about to put this thing forward that is, if I'm getting it correctly, is what you're proposing to be a structure to move people through as an initiatory path within the Maori culture. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So once the thesis has been examined and marked and all that kind of stuff, the next steps that I'll look at is gathering together. We'll be holding a wānanga, so there'll be two sets of wānanga, and wānanga are just really gathering. And so we'll get together kaumātuas, which is the elders and tribal leaders and artists from around our area, and we'll come together and we'll develop a structured process starting at the beginning, at right, so that coming of age all the way through to death. So we'll have a framework established with all the, we're going to have to probably put together new rituals, incantations, write new stuff. We're going to have to build the structure from scratch. And there'll be some educated guesses going on there, because there's a lot of cultural experts in different fields from our people that will have the valuable input on how that looks. And yeah, there's going to be a process of running a few of those wānanga to get the structure sorted out and established. Okay, this is what we're going to do. This is how it's going to roll out. This is why we're doing it. So all of those, so there'll be two sets of workshop wānanga sort of a thing, getting this thing established and rolling. So the thesis was just like putting the key in the door and opening the door, really. It's just the seed for the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I get you now. I was like a step behind in that. I thought that potentially your thesis was that prescription already, but you're putting it together as like, hey, we need to do this again as a collective. I'm with you.
Exactly.
Okay. Wow,
Yeah.
that's really impressive, man.
Yeah.
That's really impressive. Good on you. You were talking about the natural initiations too, and how like it could be crisis or
Yeah.
whatever it is. Do you
Mm.
think there is a larger initiation going on cross culturally too, in terms of like the planetary level?
Yeah. Harder. I think Earth is an initiatory classroom. I think being here on Earth right now is an initiatory process for sure. As a global collective, we deal with some dark shadows on this planet, man, and we survive amongst it. We strive amongst it as best we can, and that in
Mm,
itself is a staunch rite of passage. There was one of these an old Tohunga friend of mine who passed away a few years ago, and he would say things like, "This is a masterclass. It ain't no kindergarten. You come here because you're ready to take the next step in your spiritual evolution." So
yeah,
these are some of the thinkings that are coming out of the Wānanga and Aotearoa. This is definitely not for the faint of heart. Look at Palestine right now.
I know, man.
Those people are being slaughtered, and there's been 500 years of that shit already.
Yeah,
Most indigenous cultures have undergone that slaughter process, genocide. That ain't new, bro. All of us have experienced it in some form or another, or experienced the ramifications of it as generations who are now born into that system. And so every day I look on Instagram and I see these babies getting pulled out of the rubble in Palestine while these Israeli soldiers are dancing like fucking fools, thinking
Yeah.
they're the children of God and they have the right to do all this bullshit. There's some dark shit, bro. And being on the planet at the same time as that's going on, even though we're down the bottom end of the world away from most of all of that drama, man, part of me wants to get all vigilante and go over there and smash those buggers. You know what I'm saying? But that's part of confronting your internal dialogue and your internal evolution as a human being.
Mhm. Yep. Yep.
We can't escape it here on Earth. You have to confront it, or you can bury your head in the sand and kind of just pretend it's not there. Then you're going to really grow.
Yeah. It circles back to the comfort choice that a lot of people make. Hey, it's uncomfortable to see
Yeah,
that stuff. It's uncomfortable to acknowledge it or whatever. So
yeah,
they bury their head.
yeah.
Like there's just so much
They
of
bury
that.
their head. Ignorance is bliss, right? And it's totally understandable. I mean, this, like I say, it's some dark shit. But I do think that in order for people to really gain wisdom and gain maturity and gain growth, you have to confront all that shadow stuff. You have to look at it with eyes wide open and analyze it and come to terms with it and
Yes.
accept it. Okay, I'm just one human. I can't do jack shit about it. You know, I can't go over there and take out the Israeli army because they got all the nukes. So what do I have to do? I just have to come to terms with it, accept it. And all I can do is send up karakia and prayers for the people of Palestine.
Yeah, totally.
Tough world to live in.
But then I guess also having conversations like we are now is an important one around it, bring
Yeah,
different thoughts,
yeah,
different
yeah, yeah.
thoughts into people's minds and into their consciousness and stuff. What about your most recent tattoo? So at the start, we were talking about what your first one was. What's the most recent one you've got, or whether you've got one sort of in the pipeline?
I think it's those ones.
Oh yeah, your palms.
Shane did those, and they were probably the most painful tattoos I've ever had in my life.
Yeah,
It was killer.
they're in there.
One represents fire, the other one represents air. I'm overdue for more work on my mataura, on my face. I got my black belt in karate a couple of years ago now. So I was going to do some more then because that was a major rite of passage for me. And another one is the doctoral thesis. So once that's all wrapped up, then that'll be another, get some more markings on the face to represent all those milestones in my life.
Hmm.
And that's what I'm talking about, bringing back purpose and relevance to the art form of Moko, where
Yes.
generally speaking, you see the paintings of those old Korowa, those old men, right? Back
Mm-mm.
from the 1800s, the Goldie paintings and the Lindauer paintings, full face Moko, right? And there's this assumption that, okay, only the old people wore it because they're all old in the photos and stuff like that. But really, they started at puberty and received more markings over the whole period of their life. So a lot of those old fellas probably took a good 30, 40 years to receive their full Moko as they reached milestones in their life. So for me, work now is reverting back to that process, reinstating that process for Moko on the face especially, and the peha, the puhoro, the body, legs, torso, as well as one of the major rite of passage. That's going to be a 1 week ordeal, but the face will be a staged process for me from here on out. So I'll be introducing that as part of the strategy and the framework for
Yeah.
Ngāti, which is the tribe, my tribe here.
That's a important one because if it doesn't happen in one go, on one hand, there's what you're talking about with the puhoro, right? Where it's this big thing. It's an ordeal. You got to get through it in this
Yeah,
physical capacity, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
so breaking it up would actually be disrupting part of the gift of it, part of the initiation. Whereas
yeah,
something like the face,
yeah,
in order to get there, it's holding you in a place of, I guess, like accountability of, well, you have to keep contributing. You have to keep achieving things in order for it to build.
yeah, exactly. That's spot on. In a lot of instances, it marked things that had already happened or it had already occurred, like puberty. Okay, this happened.
Mhm.
It's time for you to get
Yep.
marked. It's done. But in other instances, it marked the beginning of a journey, the beginning of your pathway into your skill sets, so to speak. So that would be tracked along your life
Mhm.
as you reach major milestones of your skill within your skill set, whether that be warrior, or the gardener, or the carver, or the weaver. You know what I'm saying? As you reach certain milestones throughout your life and those particular skill sets, then more markings were granted. Yeah.
And again, those skill sets that you mentioned, they have a place within the group again, right? So you're not achieving these things for yourself and then getting acknowledgement, building something up for yourself and then getting acknowledged. It's again a contribution.
Contribution, exactly.
Yep. When I've been trying to unpack some of these things myself, tattooing people and trying to, I use that same language of reverse engineer. I'm just going, what's the marking about? Where are they at? What's happening? And for myself too, going through like, what have I been getting tattooed for? And what do I want to continue to get tattooed for? The simplest distillation I've come down to is if you want to have a meaningful tattoo, then you have to be living a meaningful life to have that correlation. And so obviously that can mean different things for people, but the tattoo is not going to be a magical thing that just because you want it to be meaningful, it's going to be meaningful or make things better or change things, you know? And so I see that coming through in everything that you're saying. But again, there's just such grounded context for it within Indigenous cultures. I think that's a bit of the question mark where I sit and with what I see within the tattoo industry, you know, where it's, what's it grounded in?
Over the last few years, I've been steering away from the conventions, the industry conventions. I just haven't had any interest in it anymore, just because of that sort of mentality. It's just there to look cool, really. People are just getting tattooed to look cool, generally speaking. And I guess that's just where people are at with tattooing. It's definitely still an ordeal, unless, of course, you're covering yourself in numbing cream. Then it's kind of just no ordeal at all. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do
So
know.
I've purposely stayed away from those gatherings, and I've just been heading cultural gatherings now, and been involved in Native American practitioners who are trying to revive their art form. They look towards Maori and Polynesians as the forerunners of those movements, helping others to pick up the art forms under their own cultural mentors and run with that as being something that's really cool for me to be involved with. Even going to India, one of my brothers runs the India convention over there, and you know, the first couple of conventions that I went to was kind of just standard industry sort of convention, and then I realized that, man, you're sitting on a whole bank of indigenous cultures in India who are still practicing their traditional tattooing art forms as ritual rites of passage. I said, bro, you should be bringing that to the forefront, bro. And then one is Western tattoo industry garbage. Focus on this and bring that to the forefront, because that's the root of tattooing right there. And you've got cultures in your own nation that are still practicing those ways, and don't let those fall by the side. Empower them, bring it to the forefront, help other people to see what tattooing is really about. Convention I went over there was a crew there from northern India. They must have been up close to the Naga people, and they brought a whole bunch of their village members down to the convention, and the women were heavily covered in tattoos, legs all the way up through to their arms, and so the main tattooist there, she was a woman. She'll be the next one odd on the global stage, and she was there with her crew, and they were doing their cultural performances and just talking about their tattooing process. And this woman had not had one tattoo on her. So my bro was like, "Hey," said to her, "You need to get tattooed. You need to know what it feels like." So I gave her a tattoo, her first tattoo. Things like that are really buzzy for me. Yeah.
Me and Drish were both digging into what is there that we can find in terms of our lines, you know, after our last chat. And so she's from southern India, you know, opened up a whole thread. There's just so many different strands in there when you start looking. I think we were saying it last time too. There's so many mixed genealogies now. So if someone's like wanting to connect and go, where do I place myself? What culture do I place myself within when I've got part this, part that, usually 3 or 4, 5 different lines? It's an interesting one.
Same for me. From the Maori perspective, many of us have mixed genealogies. I've got French blood. I've got English blood. I've got Scottish blood. I think there may be even some Jewish blood back in the genealogy there. And for me, I had to come to grips with acknowledging those cultures who were really, from the Maori perspective, the dark side of the force. You know what I'm saying? Because of colonization and all of that kind of stuff, it sent our culture into we came this close to extinction, really close to extinction back in the late 1800s. And because of the imperial drive of the Crown of England, growing up, you hear the sentiment amongst our people. And so you harbor this, that I harbored this animosity towards the French and the English. Not so much the Scottish, because I consider them to be just white indigenous people. The same could be said for the Welsh and all that kind of stuff. But the Scottish were and the Irish, heck, they were the first ones to be invaded by imperial England, right? And growing up and coming to grips with the fact that, okay, I've got these bloodlines running through my body. I have these physical genetic connections to these people groups. Sometimes a lot of people struggle with coming to terms with those mixed genealogies, as Maori anyway. And so for me, it's been a process of, I guess, finding the goodness in those cultures that I can relate to, and the lessons from the shadows that they have offered me over the lifetime. And man, really, the shadows is the real dark stuff that colonization has impacted upon Indigenous peoples. There's valuable lessons in it, and lessons that should be handed down to the next generation on how not to be, how not to be in the human experience, right? And those are valuable lessons. And you'll never get those lessons unless you've gone through it. You know what I'm saying? That's what I'm saying. The old fellow used to say, Earth is a masterclass. You don't come here because you want to fuse. You come here because you want to grow. And it happens through the darkness. Coming to terms with those bloodlines running through my own genealogy has been a rewarding experience. And so I acknowledging those bloodlines. And I will still do some more, especially I'm keen to go to France and explore my French lineage there. My last name is Duley, which is a French name. It's Julie, I think it's pronounced Julie in French. So my great-grandfather was French on my dad's side. So I'm keen to go and explore those genealogical links. One of my uncles went to Scotland years ago and brought back our tartan and the story of our lineage from the Armstrong clan in Scotland there. So, making those links as Maori people, we just have this tendency to make connections to the people that we meet. Oh, kia ora, bro. Who are you? Where are you from? Oh, do you know such and such? It's just about making those connections and those weaving together the lives of people. So for me, stretching out and looking at my genealogical links back into some of the European cultures is something I have been planning on doing for a while now. Really, it's just about coming to terms within yourself that this is who I am. Whether I like it or not, I've got French blood, got some German blood. I've got some of the bloodlines of these people that have really done a good job on the planet of destroying it. You know what I mean? We have to synthesize all of that as a human. We have to synthesize it.
Yeah, and it's just more of what we were talking about before. You can either put your head in the sand and not look at it, or like you're saying, you can explore it and comprehend the story. Awesome. Well, hey, thanks for giving us all of those insights that you have, sharing your story so openly. That was beautiful. I think there's lots in there for people to listen to and chew on and have a better fit for exactly what the rite of passage and its connection to tattooing is. Think about their own processes and have some more direction and more context moving forward with their tattoos and stuff. So I really appreciate that, bro.
Oh, good. My pleasure. Yeah.
Anything else that you want to share in terms of pointing people towards maybe your Instagram if they want to see work that you're doing?
Yeah, sure. My Instagram page is TU_Moko, and they can jump on there and see, they'll get a good glimpse of what my life looks like as a Moko artist. Website is artselemental.com. There's also a bunch of work on our Facebook account, which is a shared account with my wife, Turumakina. Welcome to come and check it all out and ask questions. And hopefully this dialogue encourages more dialogue amongst your listeners. That's really an important thing, I think, people to start talking about, the rites of passage.
That's why I wanted to get you in and have this chat, because I think access to the conversation can be limited in a lot of ways. So it's not like I've got a massive platform, but I know there are a fair few people that chime in, and they don't get a deeper level of conversation around tattooing in the circles that they're in or in the
Yeah.
studios they're going to. So it just helps
Yeah.
plant more seeds around.
There's a few really good authors that I've been reading, which kind of launched me into my thesis. One is Joseph Campbell.
Yes.
Joseph Campbell is a really interesting man on mythology, the power of myth, the hero's journey. So I read a lot of him and listen to a lot of him. The other one is a couple of authors from the States, Gillette and Moore. They put out a series of books about male initiation and the initiations of the male psychological archetypes. And so they identify 4 male archetypes that need to undergo ritual initiation in order to produce the maturity levels of that particular archetype. Otherwise, they fall to like shadowy aspects of the archetype. So, for example, the king is one of the archetypes. And if the king doesn't go through appropriate ritual initiation, then usually the king will become a high chair tyrant, sort of a thing, a little boy with too much power. There's plenty of that around the world, right?
Yeah.
Or they'll become a king that abdicates their power and just like a weakling king. So those are the 2 shadowy aspects of the archetype if they haven't undergone ritual initiation. So those are some really interesting readings. There's something that has sparked my interest in rites of passage more deeply. It helped me to recognize Moko as that purpose for our people. When we talk about archetypes from a Maori perspective, we still maintain our creation narratives, hero narratives, all of those narratives that have been handed down for generations and generations are still there for us. And so now in our creation stories, we have Sky Father and Earth Mother, the primal parents who had a hell of a lot of children. And when we're not talking about the children or Rangi and Papa, I'm talking about elemental forces of nature, the nature around us, the ocean, the forest, or food that is grown wild in the bush, or, fish or birds, all of these things have an archetype about them. And so 70, or some say 72 children of Rangi and Papa, Sky Father and Earth Mother, these are all archetypal characteristics of the gods, right? And so they model the right ways of interacting with the environment. And they had wars themselves. Some of them, if there's a gigantic cyclone in the Maori perspective, that's the god of winds having a war with the god of the ocean. You know what I'm saying? Warfare was kind of expressed as rage against the elements. Sometimes the elements rages against each other. For us, that's warfare. And so warfare is a part of the natural processes of the elements, right? If things are out of balance, then someone's going to get it. Someone's going to get angry, So interacting and understanding how our atua, or the deities or the forces of nature interact with each other, models to us as humans how we should interact with each other and with nature as well. I guess the point is that the archetypal world is just that it's a way of viewing our environment around us and placing ourselves within the environment and understanding how we should behave towards each other in order for nature to flourish. And we're part of nature, so kind of the gist of it.
Yeah, like when I'm listening, it sounds like a map or like a manual, so to speak. The archetypal manual of like how you fit and how things work together or don't work together and why through the stories.
Yeah.
So, I'll put those books in the links as well, just so people can have a look if they feel so inclined. Thanks again, bro. Really appreciate it.
Will do. All right, brother.
Thank you again, too. I appreciate your openness and depth of knowledge around this topic. Thank you to everyone that listened in and got all the way through. I hope that you listened closely and that it helped formulate a better picture of how tattooing can allow you to access that initiatory process in the right environments, and also that there's an importance of the bigger picture where you place yourself, the collective environment and the culture. The links to Tu's personal page and his studio page are in the show notes, as well as the book titles that he mentioned towards the end if you want to read further into this topic. And that's all for now. I'll catch you next episode.